Days I'm gonna have myself a cohort in studio just like you have Dre. You know,
It's very helpful. It's very helpful.
I'm telling you, right? Okay, and we are live. Hello, everyone. This is Dwight Woods, the Jeet Kune Do Rebel. Welcome to the Jeet Kune Do Dialogues episode number 257. If you guys are logging in on Facebook, be sure to say where you're logging in from, hit the like button, and feel free to continue doing so throughout the dialogue. If you're catching the simulcast over on the YouTube, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell as well. My dialogue partner today, is this your second or third time? Can you remember?
This is my second time. Yeah.
It's the second? Okay. All right. Well,
Yeah.
I'm always real excited to talk to the best known martial arts podcaster around the world, Alex Richter, the Kung Fu Genius. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me again. I had such a great time last time we did this. This is great.
Yeah. Right. So just so people know a little bit inside baseball, Alex said to me, well, what are we going to talk about? I go, look, man, let's just turn the cameras on and just go. Right. And
Sounds good.
Right. Whatever happens, happens. So, but then I did ask you for like the little bio and what have you. And here was the thing that I noticed, and I wanted to ask you about this. So you said you're a high school graduate, and then
Yes.
the next thing you said is that you were in Germany studying Wing Chun from 99 to 2002. Now, I don't know what year you were born. So what's the time period between graduating high school and being in Germany?
It's just a couple years actually. So I think I graduated high school in '96. So
Okay.
those few years in between were basically me really becoming fanatical about Wing Chun, traveling to places like Vancouver and around because I went to high school in the Seattle area. Although I'm from the East Coast, I'm from Jersey, but I went to high school out there. So I was basically exploring and learning more about Wing Chun. I had a job at BMW Motorcycles, so I was earning money, and
Okay.
I really was having a good time. And then I decided I wanted to pursue it full time, and that's when I decided in '99 to go to Langenthal Castle in Germany.
How'd you get a job at BMW Motorcycles as a high school graduate? What do you know about bikes?
I didn't know anything about bikes. I am a BMW car nerd. Like, well, I used to race old classic BMW cars,
Okay.
and I didn't know anything about motorcycles. And my friend had a job, and he was like, "Hey, they have an opening if you want to be the manager or whatever. You just need to know something about motorcycles." So I took all the brochures from BMW Motorcycles. I learned all the models and everything, and I totally faked it and got the job. And I still barely know anything about motorcycles.
Okay, but at least you knew the lingo.
Yes,
Right?
I could fake it very well. Yes.
Okay, all right. So then you're in Germany for 3 years, right? And where do you go after that?
So I had already done a number of years of Wing Chun before I went to Germany, and I was already
Right.
in the longtime Wing Chun Association. So I went there basically to really immerse myself in it. And the Trainer Academy in Germany, which was the headquarters at that time, you could train 6 hours a day, 5 days a week. And I'm like, that's what I want to do. I want to do nothing but Wing Chun. So I went there and I did that immersion course. So for 3 years, I was training 6 hours a day, 5 days a week. And I became essentially, the ranking systems sometimes don't mean much to people outside of it, but basically a junior instructor, a trainer, not like a full Sifu yet, but I was like a trainer. And then I came to New York and I started teaching. So I basically was as green as they come. And I was like, sure, New York, that seems like an easy place to teach. Let's go there. And then I just jumped in. Yeah.
All right. When I talk to people like you, where like I have a plan, I have an idea, I have notes, but then stuff just keeps bombarding my brain, So, but I'm gonna try to stay as chronological as we can. But there's this other thing that's just bugging me. Not bugging me, not in a bad way, right? But
Okay.
remind people again your early experience with Jeet Kune Do, because this is going to loop back to there is your famous video, I think it's called Why I Chose Wing Chun and not Jeet Kune Do or something.
something
Is
like
that
that. I don't even
something
remember
like
what
that?
it's called.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, so basically, I've been a Bruce Lee fanatic since I was 8 years old. I started with Taekwondo when I was 8 years old, and I did that pretty intensely because there was no Wing Chun, there was no Jeet Kune Do in central New Jersey at that time. As you
Mhm.
know, in most, unless you're in a major metropolis like New York or something like that, it's difficult to find Jeet Kune Do, Wing Chun, or some of these more rare arts.
Yeah.
So I did that, but I really wanted to do the stuff that Bruce Lee did. So I read his books, I read all of that kind of stuff. I knew about Wing Chun, I knew about Jeet Kune Do, but it wasn't until I moved to the Seattle area, and or when I was around 14, I think, I started learning Chinjo Wing Chun from Sifu Johan, who comes from the James DeMille and Ed Hart
Right.
side of Bruce Lee's non-classical Kung Fu. And that was huge for me because not only was it Wing Chun, but it was also Bruce Lee. You know, it was from guys who had learned from Bruce Lee.
Hmm.
It's a kind of
Yep.
pre-Jeet Kune Do stuff, right?
Yep.
So for me, it was like, it's not just Wing Chun, it's also like the Bruce Lee Wing Chun. So it was huge
Yeah.
for me. And then,
Yeah.
of course, as I got into that, yeah, I was interested in, okay, what do classical Wing Chun people do? And then what do Jeet Kune Do people do? Because when you're in non-classical Seattle era Bruce Lee stuff, you're kind of, as Jesse Glover put it, between Wing Chun and Jeet Kune Do.
Yeah.
So that's why I wanted to look at the Wing Chun side of things, the more traditional side, see what they did, and then look at, I guess, the furtherance of that, which would have been the Jeet Kune Do stuff. So around the time I was, I think, 17 or 18, so I had done the Chinjo Wing Chun for 2 or 3 years. I decided to try out a Jeet Kune Do class, which was taught at a community college in Bellevue, Washington. I'm not going to say who the instructor was, but he was under Larry Hartzell, whom I knew
Hmm.
because I had Larry Hartzell's Jeet Kune Do from Trapping the Grappling books. Like I had all those books. I was like, oh, this
Right.
guy learned
Yeah.
from Larry Hartzell. Wow, how cool, right? And I went to his class, and he basically, it was like a summer course. It was like an 8-week Jeet Kune Do course, me one time a week kind of thing. And then when I started training there, it was a very JKD concept style of teaching, but I would say I like JKD concepts on the whole, like from what I understand of it later. But think about
Okay.
what all the negative stereotypes are of Jeet Kune Do concepts, and then make that this school. You know, so
Right.
there
Yeah.
was, so in my opinion, it wasn't an accurate representation of what the Jeet Kune Do concept side is trying to do. It literally was a hodgepodge of every class you're doing 50 different things. There was no thread. There was no like basics or foundations or whatever. But I had a chance to spar with a bunch of people outside of my school with basically no equipment on as a teenager. I loved it. Coming home, black eye, fat lip. Ah, it was so much fun today. But after a few classes, I started to realize I'm not really learning anything, and
Right.
nothing I did in the first class was built on for the second class, which was further expanded in the third class. I felt like it was just kind of rolling the dice every time I went there. One day I remember he was showing us how to defend punches with like a bandana or something like that. And I just remember like going, this is cool in a certain context, but I want to do that Bruce Lee stuff.
Yeah.
This the straight lead. The guy wanted to do that, and I just felt that he wasn't really doing that, and that did put a sour taste in my mouth for what is being represented as JKD until I got out there and I got to see the better side of the original JKD guys and the better side of the JKD concepts guys, and see people like Burton Richardson and stuff like that and go like, no, there is a lot more to it than I originally thought. So that was kind of my first unfortunate negative experience. And
Mhm.
it's probably the reason why I decided to then go the Wing Chun route rather than the JKD route,
Right.
was probably because of that unfortunate experience.
Yeah. Well, okay. So now, two things I heard as you were explaining that, which I think play a role in the success of City Wing Chun. Thread, build in every class, build in on the previous class, right? And then that hodgepodge thing, right? It's no way to run a school.
Right.
Now, as somebody who says that he made every mistake in the book, right, in running his school when he first opened up his school, how would you fix Jeet Kune Do?
Oh my God. Wow. put me on the spot, right? I'm gonna get daggers and arrows from every side coming in here. So I don't know, because I'm really big into didactic and pedagogy and training and teaching methods, and how do you best disseminate information in an ongoing group class versus a one-off seminar versus regular private training, because these are all different modalities and it depends on what the student wants to learn and how best to present that information. The only thing I would think about, because of course it's going to sound somewhat heretical, I suppose, for Jeet Kune Do, because you know, the moment you try to classify stuff, the moment you try to categorize stuff, you can pull to a passage out of Tao of Jeet Kune Do and go, Bruce Lee said you shouldn't do that. That the crystallization of any methods, even if they're the teaching methods, is already somehow binding and shaping this, right? So I'm going to say, okay, fine. Let's not talk about codifying methods or drills, but let's talk about perhaps the curriculum could be done in a cycle where we focus on an aspect, whether that's a range or a certain type of movement, for a certain amount of time, build that up, maybe build a second concept over the second month, and then on the third month, another one, and then you put everything together at the end of 3 months, so you show how you were building this thing all along. So there could be a structure, even if it's looser. I'm not talking about specific drills, but ideas, so that at least the student has a thread and they can kind of go through something before more is piled on their plate. That would be my most political free way of saying it.
Okay, well, I'll tell you what that reminds me of. That reminds me of the podcast I did where I sat down and I explained to people that the rotating curriculum that I learned from Dave Kovar is perfect for Jeet Kune Do, right?
Yes,
And
absolutely.
While I was sitting in that session with him, I realized the yin yang with the two arrows is the perfect symbol for the rotating curriculum.
Yes, absolutely, right?
Right? So I recognize, when you were describing that, I recognized it. I mean, am I on the right track? Because that's how I recognized it.
Yeah, I mean, we always had a structured program in longtime Wing Chun, but I also learned the rotating curriculum through seminars, you know, for martial arts business, and they do it usually, like karate schools do it for like kids martial arts, but the template of the rotating curriculum, if a school is not teaching this way, then it can only be because it's a personality driven school where everyone is there because of that one guy. But if you want a good teaching system, I think the rotating curriculum or some variation of it is one of the only ways to go. Because it builds things progressively. It allows for disguised repetition and actual repetition, and it allows you to complete an idea before moving on to the next phase.
Yeah, you can be as heretical as you want to be if you're in my company when it comes to Jeet Kune Do, because I saw it and I thought to myself, this is what can save Jeet Kune Do.
Yes,
for sure. Because the guy with the bandana and what have you, maybe he came back from a seminar and Sifu Inasano showed that weekend, and so he puts it into class. I guarantee you it was something like that, which is no structure. But that's where they go wrong. They think no way is way, no limitation is limitation means no structure. That's bullcrap. That's bullcrap, right? Bruce Lee had structure. He definitely had structure, right? Anyhow.
Totally agree. But by the way, after that somewhat disappointing experience, I actually wrote an email to the late Sifu Larry Hartzell, because this guy was claiming to be his representative, and I wrote him an email. I was like 17 years old, and I wrote it like, you know, hey, you know, Sifu Hartzell, I just did this class with this guy. He claims to be in your association, but I found that the teaching was very scattered. So this isn't me at 45 going back and imposing what that guy was teaching. Like, I knew then that this guy was kind of teaching all over the place.
Yeah.
And Sifu Larry Hartzell answered me back right away, and he couldn't have been more kind. He couldn't have been more polite. He was like, oh, I'm so sorry you had that experience. yeah, we tried to keep things in a more logical progression. But yeah, in Jeet Kune Do, sometimes you have people just kind of show this and show that. So the funny thing is, he could have been defensive and be like, "Who the hell are you to
Right.
tell me how to teach?" But he wasn't, and I was a nobody.
No.
No one even knew my name then. I wasn't even an instructor. And later when he passed away, I always felt. I always have, anytime people mention his name, I always have a little fondness in my heart because he was kind to a teenage
Hmm.
version of me when he didn't need
Hmm.
to be, when he normally would have someone you would expect them to be defensive, and he was an absolute mensch. And so when people say
Yeah.
nice things about him, I get it. I totally get it.
Well, yeah. I mean, you got to see an aspect of the real Larry Hartzell, right? There are a lot of people who only saw, let's say like the seminar version or what have you, right?
Right.
Yeah. And the thing is, I think that like I told you earlier, I want to try to stay chronological with you, but the truth is, people who are disordered, as am I, right? The whole jump from here to there aspect of Jeet Kune Do that you can find some places, we love it
Right.
until we grow up and we realize, nah, as Damien Marley would say, that na make it, right? Yeah, okay, because no, it's not good. What can, if we think about this, if we think about this deeply, what is there out there in the world that is highly successful that has no structure to it? Right?
Yeah.
So you cannot tell me that along comes this thing called Jeet Kune Do and it's going to somehow not follow the rules as such and get somewhere, right? Have you ever met Dan Inosanto?
I have. Actually, I did a Kali class at his Inosanto Academy once. My very good friend, Dr. Mark Cheng, brought me
Okay,
there
right.
and
That's what I
introduced
figured.
me. Yeah, and introduced me to him. I very rarely get starstruck because I've met some pretty amazing people in martial arts. But when I, had the chance to go up to Sifu Inosanto and say, I was so tongue tied. I just felt like such a moron. And I was just blah, 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 blah. And he even said like, "Oh, are you from England?" And I was like, "No." He's like, "Oh, I thought I heard that in your accent." I must have been speaking so incoherently. For whatever reason, he thought I had a British accent. Okay, just to give you an idea of just how kind of tongue twisted I was when I
Yeah,
met him. So yeah,
yeah. Well, I mean, being what is it? The shortest German and the whitest Cuban.
short as German and white as Cuban. That's it's gonna say that on my grave.
Yeah. Yeah, so I figured if you had been, it would have been through Dr. Cheng, because
Yes,
you are. So tell me a little bit about what is it the K3 combat system?
yes.
Because I don't know anything about it at all.
It's absolutely amazing. So Dr. Mark Cheng and his partner, Dr. Jimmy Yun, taught the workshop at my school. This is like, I think, a year or two before the pandemic. And so we did the certification. And what I liked about it is that it has the base is martial arts, but the idea is to do it to improve how you move. So
Hmm.
almost using martial arts as a mechanism for prehabilitation as well as rehabilitation, improving coordination and improving all these things that can improve you across a wide number of attributes, not just in the narrow field of martial arts. So it was almost
Right.
like using the Filipino martial arts, for example. There's a lot of other stuff in there as a tool to improve certain motor skills, neurological issues people have with right and left. So you use the padded sticks and you do a couple of Kali patterns, but the idea is to create something in your brain that's going to improve you as an athlete in every aspect, not just specifically here. There's lots of really great movement stuff. So I can't recommend it enough. I love it. It was so great and such a great addition to any type of martial arts training that someone would do. But
Right.
it's more on the prehabilitation rehabilitation side than it is as a combative side. Even though it's called
Hmm.
K3 combat systems, it's more holistic system for improving your health and coordination.
Right. Now, it's not Wing Chun at all. So why are you studying it?
Because normally if I'm going to study something, it has to not be Wing Chun for it to be worthwhile for me. because I've been doing Wing Chun for so long, and I've had the rare opportunity to learn Wing Chun and train Wing Chun from many different people, including people who are not in my own lineage. I basically think, talk, and breathe Wing Chun all day.
Mhm.
And so I like the moments when I'm a fish out of water, where I put myself in Miami at the Valenti Brothers doing sparring, which is based on Gracie Jiu Jitsu stuff, and like it just be to put me out of my
Yeah.
element and put me somewhere else, because I feel that that's the moment when you grow, when you force yourself out of your comfort zone, when you do something that's unfamiliar. Same like when I train with Magno and Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, same like when I do K3 combat stuff. I just find it a lot more rewarding, because sometimes my biggest epiphanies about Wing Chun come from when I
Mhm.
go and do something else. And I can
Yeah.
see
Huh.
something in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu and I go like, oh, and that totally changes how I do a certain sweep in Wing Chun, and it gives me perspective. Or I look at certain aspects of what Dr. Mark Cheng taught me in K3 and go
Right.
like, yeah, obviously these are some underpinnings of the health side of Wing Chun, and I didn't know it because it's not my field. So I find my best conversations about Wing Chun are with Sifu Mak Chi Kong, who's a Hung Gar master in Hong Kong, because he comes at it from a nonpartisan way, and I can have conversations that are devoid of any politics or posturing, and
Mhm.
hear the view of Wing Chun as told by someone from another kung fu style, and go, "Why I never looked at it that way." So I find the most worthwhile pursuit for me to improve the project of my Wing Chun and how I teach it is to train with people who not don't even know what Wing Chun is. So
Right.
that I find is actually one of the requirements when I move outside of my
Yeah.
walled garden.
I was looking at on your website at the video testimonials, right? And when one young lady said about something about the great workout, and I'm of the opinion that the average middle-aged person, or maybe even younger, let's say 20s into their 30s nowadays, equates martial art and martial art training with working out.
Sure.
Right now, you and I might not be of that generation. We
Right.
equated martial art with martial art. They equate it with working out. So I
Yeah.
thought I'd ask you this question: how the heck do you make people sweat in Wing Chun?
Very easily. Very, very easily. So you take everything you're doing in the class and you intensify it. So
Right.
if you teach an hour and a half class, you have to have a bit of an intensity curve. So you start off with some kind of warm up, basic movements, fine motor skills, form, whatever drills, and the intensity peak starts to peak up like this until about half an hour in, where you drill for a little bit, and then you take that stuff and you either put it in chisao sparring or regular sparring, and then you have a workout, and then you bring them down before they leave. So I do like this slight intensity arc through the class, and then build it up, sustain it, and then
Mm-hmm.
cool them down before they go, so that they don't leave like still like this. You bring them down a little bit before you send them out into the wild. Wing Chun is easy to get a sweat. I mean, doing pad work with Wing Chun, kick shield stuff, heavy bag stuff, steps and punches rounds, heavy sparring. There's
But
lots
y'all
of stuff
don't.
that we do.
But y'all don't kickbox.
No, we don't, but you can practice. I'm a Wing Chun guy, you're not a Wing Chun guy, and now I have to defend myself against you. And you can do that for multiple
Ah,
rounds. So all of our Wing Chun sparring is always I'm Wing Chun, you're not Wing Chun. So because you're not going to be faced with another Wing Chun fighter out there. I mean, like, we're not partying like it's 1899 Qing Dynasty, getting attacked by Wing Chun people every corner, right?
right.
Most Wing Chun people party like it's 1899, right? So so that's what we do. And whether we use a classical frame or a modern self-defense frame, I'm a Wing Chun person. My partner can attack me with non-Wing Chun stuff, can go for a tackle, can go for a kick, and I have to go in there and do my thing and defend it. And
Right.
we can do this again and again. Plus, we have to switch roles. I get to be the bad guy to keep my non-Wing Chun stuff sharp, so
Mm-hmm.
that I know better how to defend against it. And they're going back and forth, throwing kicks, high kicks, low kicks, spin kicks, jab, cross, takedown, all this kind of stuff. And you got to use your Wing Chun, and we swap back and forth. And
Right.
Yeah, that's, as you know, that's how the whole thing's done.
Now, but okay, so there's a little thing you just said there. Most Wing Chun people party like it's 1899.
Mhm.
So how radical an approach are you using or accused of using?
Oh, I don't know if I'm accused of anything, mainly because I don't hold a very high opinion on what Wing Chun people have to say about other Wing Chun styles, because all the Wing Chun people are very partisan. I mean, like, look, I'll be quite blunt here. All right, if you meet someone from the William Cheung lineage and you ask them what their opinion is of Leung Ting, you know what they're going to say before they even open their mouth. And that's the sad
Mhm.
thing. If you ask most Learning people what they think about William Cheung, you know what they're going to say before they open their mouth. And so we have almost these like a priori pre-packed opinions of other people.
Yeah,
I'm good friends with a lot of Wong Sun Learn guys, but I've been around them long enough that I know what the Wong Sun Learn guys think about that guy. I know what they think about that guy. They like this guy, don't like that guy. The Choi Shun team guys like this guy, don't like that guy, like this. It's like I already know in advance if someone tells me what lineage of Wing Chun that they're
hmm,
from, if they're pretty in line with their lineage, before they even say anything, I can probably tell you these are the three guys they like, these are the three guys they hate. So as a
right.
result, I find them very boring and uninteresting. They never say anything that goes against party context.
Yeah.
So I don't really care if someone says anything about my Wing Chun. It doesn't really
Yeah.
bother me.
Now, I'm sure you've been told this before, but with what you just described to me there, you don't need JKD. We got the same shit, right, that you just described.
They all have the same stuff. Look, I also, and this is why my biggest epiphanies come from when I train outside of my line. When
Yeah.
I go and train with the more traditional Gracie Jiu-Jitsu guys who are more in line with Helio, it's more about jujitsu as a mechanism of self-defense, right? So we're not talking about MMA per se or sport
Hmm.
jujitsu. We're talking about we're
Hmm.
on the street. How do I get a clinch, get this guy down in a self-defense context? When you talk to the sport fighting guys that are pulling leg locks and X guards and all this kind of stuff that wouldn't be the best thing to do in a street fight, but it's an
Right.
extension of jujitsu, then you go, oh, the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu guys also talk shit about each other. You have the self-defense
Yes.
BJJ camp, then you have the sport Jiu-Jitsu camp. The sport guys,
Right.
they also don't get it. Oh, Eddie Bravo will give you a black belt even if you never even trained in a gi. That's a huge controversy. How can you get a black belt if you only did no gi jiu-jitsu? And then you start to see it's not just Jeet Kune Do, it's not just Wing Chun. It's anytime humans get together and
Right.
organize, you have in-group and out-group think in every human endeavor. And that people are still
Hmm.
surprised by that. I find that more surprising than the fact that people don't get along and have all this
Yeah.
bullshit going on anyway, right?
Yeah. Hence the podcast episode. All lineage debates are ridiculous or
Laughable.
something like. Right.
Laughable. Yes. 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 Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, absolutely. So so to come back to your original question, the Learning Wing Chun system has always been a little bit on the heretical side anyway. Sifu Learning, even in his very early days, placed a big emphasis on fighting against non-Wing Chun styles. He's like, yes, of course, we have to be able to do Chi Sao and Wing Chun specific things if we're faced with another Wing Chun guy or Jeet Kune Do guy or whatever. But hey, let's face it, the dude on the street is going to try to knock your face off with a swing, going to try to grab you, tackle you, hold your arms, put you in a clinch, stuff you in a headlock. So if you're not training your Wing Chun to defend against these things, then you're not really preparing yourself, because even what Wing Chun people forget is Wing Chun was traditionally designed to fight against other styles of Kung Fu. It was not designed as a mechanism to do Wing Chun versus other Wing Chun people. In the days when Wing Chun was designed, let's just pick the 1850s as a random part of the timeline. In that stage of development, what were the Wing Chun fighters worried about? They were worried about people who did more northern broad arm styles, big wilder swinging punches, bigger kicks, and they were worried about the other neighboring southern styles that also had short action and short jolty movements like Wing Chun. So you had to train both how to defend broadside, wild, swing, crazy movements and more fine motor skills. Those were the two types of fighters Wing Chun people primarily dealt with in the early days. But the main thing is they weren't fighting other Wing Chun people. They were fighting some people who did Wing Chun like things and people who did
Hmm.
things that weren't like Wing Chun at all. Flash
Yeah.
forward to now, if you were a space alien and you came down and went into any Wing Chun school and you didn't know anything about it and you were forced to observe, you would think that Wing Chun is a style that only fights people that also do this thing called Wing Chun. And that somehow we're obsessively just trying to do this thing with someone and then hit them. The thread has been lost from Wing Chun was designed to fight against the other styles to now it's whose Wing Chun is better. How can I out chi sao this other guy's chi sao with some technology and tricks he doesn't have? And I'm like, dude, the guy on the street who picks a fight with you isn't even going to try to stick to your arms. He's just going to try to smack your face and smother you against the wall. What are you going to do against that? Because I find that's staying in line with the tradition of Wing Chun more than going into who does chi sao better. Who cares? It's like a distinction without a difference. It's like having a trophy for being able to whisper the loudest. Who cares?
Yeah. So why, knowing all this and knowing that you have to be prepared against things other than Wing Chun, why don't you have, and I know the answers to these questions, or I think I know the answers, but I still have to ask them for the audience, right? Why don't you have a kickboxing class at your school? Why don't you have a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu class at your school?
That's a great question. And that's actually something I have contemplated, because one of the things our students need to learn is they need to learn basic striking from non-Wing Chun styles so I can teach them how to apply the Wing Chun I'm about to teach them. So what we usually do is we just give basic tutorials, real quick, jab, cross, uppercut, basic takedown, basic headlock. So what we do is we give them some of the basic types of attacks that other people will do. And we also integrate it into the sparring. I have something called add-ons, because when they have to play a bad guy, sometimes having not done those other martial arts, they don't always know all the different things they should be trying to do against the Wing Chun person. So I have these add-ons, which are based on normal behaviors that happen in the street. What are the kind of things that happen if you try to chain punch someone on the street? Well, he could run away from you, so you need to learn how to pursue. He could also do the opposite and just press you and be unfazed by your punches. So you're going to need to learn what happens if he tries to smother my punches. The guy might just try to grab your arms and stop you from chain punching. So you need to learn against that. He could change levels and try to tackle you or put you in a headlock. So those are the 5 basic add-ons that reflect what happens in normal street fights or self-defense. And they got to learn that first. But I've toyed with the idea of having, like, let's say once a week, non-Wing Chun striking class, just specifically to teach the students how to do it better so they play a better bad guy. And it actually is something that I'm currently contemplating. And right now I am working with Magno Gama, my Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu coach, to create a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu program specifically for Wing Chun instructors that makes sense with how we move. And and also gives them an idea of, this is what happens when you go on the ground with one of these guys. This is why you need to avoid it, but you also need to know what that feels like. So actually some things like this are in the works right now for my instructors first, and I'll kind of beta test the program on them. And then I will see if it's appropriate to put elements of that earlier, because the last thing I want to do is, hey, congratulations, you joined City Wing Chun. Now you need to learn kickboxing and jiu-jitsu. It's like, I signed up for Wing Chun. So I still think that they should have a solid base of Wing Chun first before we do it. That's why I leave it more for instructors and higher levels. But something like what you suggested, as a matter of fact, is something that I am currently working on.
Okay. How many people, what's the percentage of people who call you up, send an email, sign up for the trial lesson, or would have walked through the door or what have you, come for Wing Chun?
That's a good question, because I used to be way more hands-on with like the front end and the desk and all that stuff. I have for a number of years now that job has been handled by assistant instructors, enrollment directors, and stuff like that. So I'm not always the most hands-on when it comes to those things. But I can tell you what it was like when I was running stuff, because the first number of years of my school, I did everything, which is also why I said I also made every mistake in the book, because I learned it myself the hard way, right? The problem is it's a matter of perception, and confirmation bias has a lot to do with it. When you're small and you have a small core group, like a lot of small Wing Chun schools do, like my school was at the beginning, well, the people who seek you out are the people who are looking for Wing Chun. That's how they found you, because you don't have a name. So what happens is your first generation, usually are people who they know what you do, they know your line, they followed you. And then so you look around and you go, yeah, everyone is here because of Wing Chun or because of my lineage or my name or whatever. Then your school starts getting bigger and you start getting your first batch of students that never even heard of Wing Chun when they joined. And it's kind of off-putting because the mistake we often make as school owners is we imagine our student base are like little carbon copies of us, just
Yes.
just a way less refined or developed version, and we assume I'm going to have like a bunch of little Alex Richters joining my school, and that is not the case. The reason why we're the ones teaching is because we are the outliers, and to expect that the masses are all going to be like highly motivated people who come in and train and take notes and take this stuff seriously is not the case. So as the school gets bigger, then you start to get people who are not there specifically because it's Wing Chun. They're there because they want to do martial arts training and they came across your advertising. They don't know you versus a karate guy versus a whatever guy. And that's where the real test of how good your school is. Can you get people who are not already pre-sold on the martial art or lineage that you're doing? Can you sell the benefits of your school not to someone who already knows Wing Chun, Learn Jing, Yip Man, Bruce Lee, whatever, but someone who goes, Wing what? What is this about? And if you can show that your program has value to that person, well, then you're really starting to create something that is more sustainable outside of just the small walled garden of Wing Chun Kung Fu.
You know, I have never heard, I can't think, I might be wrong, but I cannot think of any Jeet Kune Do guy, right, who's ever said anything like that with regards to Jeet Kune Do. Instead, they bitch and moan that people, they do one of two things. They bitch and moan that people don't know about Jeet Kune Do or don't know who Bruce Lee is, right? Or they lament the fact that people don't know. But I never hear anybody with solutions for that.
Right.
You know, or anybody saying, well, here's how I handle that at my school.
Right.
Here's how I make sure that this and whatever, right? You know, I was always lucky. Even when we were approaching 300 students, I'd say 80% of the people who came to us for Jeet Kune Do. Even as we grew. Because that's how we presented ourselves, you know, for forever. Right. Okay. So I'm going to jump to something, and I swear to you, this happened about 45 minutes before we went live. A question from another part of the internet. And here's what it asked. I wrote it down. Where the hell is it? Was Wing Chun derived from the Filipino martial arts?
Yeah, talking about confirmation bias, right? So,
okay. So listen to this, right? So somebody said, so often has he said in teaching Wing Chun, or is it in teaching Kali? Shoot, now I can't remember, because that's my own confirmation bias. Because what we call wing block in Kali, right? The arm shape is somewhat like bongsa, right? Which I imagine is called wing block also, right? And then the whole, you know, like we go block, check, hit, and that check, some people say is like pak sao and stuff like that. And then you have butterfly knives, and you have double swords, and we have double stick, and you call it butterfly knives, and we call the balisong butterfly knife, right?
Right.
So now, as far as I'm concerned, none of that has anything to do with Wing Chun being derived from the Filipino martial arts. But how would you answer that question?
Well, I mean, it depends. If I was face to face with that guy and I had a little more time, then it's easy. It's easy to do it in a more entertaining way. When you have to type these things out, you always have to be worried about tone, right?
Yeah.
So that's why sometimes you actually have to be super gracious when you type something out. in a way where if you have the person there, you can rib them a little bit because you can show them and they know you're not trying to be mean, right? So the thing is that, well, first of all, if we just looked at on the surface of the general history of these kind of things, looking at how much older the history of Chinese martial arts are compared to the more modern takes of Filipino martial arts, it seems kind of weird to say that it went the other way around in terms of the chicken and the egg. But I can see where when you see similar things, people are going to go, oh, see, right? Now, first of all, as you know, and Bruce Lee was very famous for this, saying that, you know, hey, we only have 2 hands and 2 legs, right? So like, obviously you're going to have a lot of parallel thinking all over the world. I mean, look at the statues of Greek pancration fighters from thousands of years ago in positions that you see in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, in boxing positions that you see in kickboxing, and vertical fists like you see in Wing Chun. And then to say, and there were some people that said, pancration guys use a vertical fist and a squared up position. Ergo, Alexander the Great must have brought Wing Chun to China. You see what I mean? So the thing is, like, you need only see a pattern, and how many steps do you need to create a connection that's satisfying for yourself? But the fact that it's satisfying for you doesn't make it true. In fact, a lot of things that are very satisfying and pleasing to ourselves are by their very definition untrue, because most truths are not pleasant. And so people are always trying to make it that way, right? But there's actually a real easy reason or real simple explanation, and it's a slight oversimplification for the similarities between Filipino martial arts and an art like Wing Chun. Okay, Wing Chun is known as a Southern Chinese martial art, a Cantonese martial art, although that is not entirely true. It's really a type of Hakka martial art, and it's originally from Fujian, which is the province next to the canton, but you have Canton, Guangdong, and then you have Fujian right next to it. The Fujian is where the original white crane came from, and it is the root art of most of the Southern martial arts. Wing Chun, Hong Kuen, obviously white crane, Southern mantis, all these arts came from this one region of Fujian, and then the Hakka people brought it into Canton, where they then became all these different martial arts. Well, that means that our roots are in Fujianese martial arts. Well, you know that Filipino people are a diverse mix of different ethnicities. And one of them, many of them, have Chinese roots. Do you want to guess what province most Filipinos' Chinese ancestors come from? From Fujian. Okay? That's why. So a lot of the Chinese that migrated to the Philippines come from the same region that bore all the martial arts, of which Wing Chun is one of them. So I think if any Chinese martial arts made it to the Philippines and became the foundation of some Filipino martial arts, it came from that region, which is the same place that birthed our martial art. So it's very easy to see where that connection can come from.
Yeah. But see, it goes right back to what Bruce Lee said, right? 2 arms and 2 legs.
Yeah.
You know, so now the only thing to do, right, which is why I love Dan and Asano. Now the only thing to do is study as much shit as you can.
Yeah.
You know, and have a good time doing it.
Yes. It's basically Einstein's final project, right? To create the unified theory of everything. All right. You learned how certain things work at a certain level, physics, for example, cosmology in the sake of Einstein. But he felt that there must be one thing that is actually binding everything together. And this is the so-called theory of everything. And I think when you have specialists who look deeply into their art or their craft, at some point they go, what's the universal truth that they all have in common? That we can then prune away some of the differences that we like to argue about and really go to the root of it. And I feel that that's usually the journey of most mature martial art instructors. Most immature martial art instructors are just going to talk about the differences and put them in a megaphone and then try to stigmatize people who believe otherwise, rather than going like, you know, there's only certain ways you can make grips that make sense. There are only certain ways that you can pull, grab, or whatever that are going to keep you safe. There's certain ways you can punch that are going to minimize potential counters and damage to yourself. Let's look for those things. That's far more interesting a project than saying the Wu Sao should be this way, but you do the Wu Sao that way, and therefore we cannot have a conversation.
Right. Man, this is almost like talking to myself. I swear. I swear. It's so much like talking to myself. I heard you say on one of your podcasts about becoming deeply enamored of all things Hong Kong.
Yes.
I mean, and then, well, based on the way your romantic life evolved, I imagine it's literal, right? Deeply enamored of all things. What was the first trip to Hong Kong? When was it, and why was it?
My first trip to Hong Kong was in 1996, and it was basically a glorified high school graduation gift for me because when I was growing up, I grew up in Jersey, and I was in love with New York City. My whole thing is I wanted to go to New York City. I wanted to be in New York City. I could climb the highest tree my parents had in the backyard, and at the very, very top of the tree where the branches almost couldn't even sustain my weight, on the clearest day, I could see the World Trade Center. And for me, I would just go up there and I would just be like, wow, New York, I want to go be there one day, right? And then I saw Enter the Dragon and saw that opening shot of Victoria Harbor in Hong Kong. And I was like, oh, Hong Kong, a modern city like New York, but everyone there knows Kung Fu. Was my perception, right?
Right.
Go to Hong Kong. Finding Kung Fu in Hong Kong is like finding a needle in a haystack nowadays. But that was my perception. So I kind of grew up with this dual fascination of both New York City and Hong Kong as places that I want to go. Obviously, Hong Kong films, Bruce Lee, all that kind of stuff that made me get really, really into it. And when I went there for the first time at age 18, not only did I just fall more in love with the city of Hong Kong, but I met Sammo Hung the first time I went to Hong Kong. He was at the restaurant I was eating breakfast at the hotel. And if you had asked me 5 minutes before Sammo Hung walked in, hey, Alex, 18-year-old Alex, if there's one Hong Kong movie star alive today you would like to meet more than anyone else, who would it be? I would have said Sammo Hung over Jackie Chan, because I just was fascinated with Sammo's ability to do everything Jackie can do, but on a 200-something pound frame. And the dude fought Bruce Lee at the beginning of Enter the Dragon.
Yeah.
All right. And lo and behold, Sammo Hung walks in, and my jaw was on the floor. I told my mom, I'm like, Mom, that's Sammo Hung. She's like, she just saw some fat Chinese guy. And she's like, who's like that guy? I'm like, that guy's one of the most famous Hong Kong movie stars. He's amazing. And she's like, that guy? I'm like, yeah, that guy right there. And so that was like, so for someone who was like a budding Hong Kong nerd, Chinese martial arts fanatic, to go and meet Sammo Hung the very first time I ever went to Hong Kong was almost, I don't believe in superstition. I don't believe in any of those kind of things, but like, it couldn't have been a more perfect sign for like, yeah, you might want to organize your life around this stuff because this seems to be where your interest is in. I wasn't interested in anything but Bruce Lee, Wing Chun in Hong Kong after the time I was 15. Literally could not care about any other topic.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. If you're, I don't know if it's any different today. Was there ever a time when if you're on Mott Street, you could feel like you were in Hong Kong?
Not once you've been to Hong Kong. If you're someone who grew up in New York, Chinatown, especially back in the day, when you, or let's just say you grew up in New York and you go to Chinatown, that probably feels like Hong Kong for someone who's never been to Hong Kong. But the moment you go to Hong Kong, you wouldn't say, oh, New York Chinatown feels like Hong Kong. Maybe when you talk to some individuals there, you get a little bit of that vibe, doing business and hustling or something like that. But no, Hong Kong is a totally, energetically, it's different from New York. And it's difficult to describe that to people who haven't been there. I still find Hong Kong perhaps one of the most fascinating cities. It's just this confluence of old and new and ultra modern. And it's really, really amazing. And I'm happy now after, these few years of the virus of unknown origins, to finally be able to take a group of people to Hong Kong again. And so I have my, ultimate Hong Kong Kung Fu tour in August, and it's already mostly filled up at this point.
Oh,
And
nice.
I'm going to finally take people around and show them the Hong Kong that I've come to learn
Oh, I
and
love
love
it.
as a tour,
Yeah.
as a tour guide for the first time, and be like, this is where Bruce Lee had this fight. This is where he went to school. This is where
Yeah.
Yip Man used to teach. And this is where they shot this. And I'm monetizing my years of traveling over there and I'm very excited to do it.
I love the idea. So as a non-native New Yorker, though,
Mm-hmm.
and as a Bruce Lee and Kung Fu fanatic,
Yeah.
explain to me why were Kung Fu films so popular in New York?
Oh, yes. So that's a total cultural thing, right? Because that whole thing, like, the Shaolin and the Wu-Tang and all that kind of stuff. I mean, that is a very, very New York thing. And I think there are a couple reasons for that. New York has always been a very eclectic and international city where you have every culture under the sun. Even the borough that I live in Queens. And the specific area of Queens, which is one of the 5 boroughs of New York, the most number of foreign languages of any geographical area are spoken in Queens. We have the biggest diversity of ethnicity in one place is Queens, where you have everything. And
Wow.
so you imagine that New York's always kind of been a little bit like that. So there's definitely an aspect of the old grindhouse film culture on 42nd Street where you just had movie theater after movie theater showing double features in the 70s, and they would show all the schlockiest stuff, grindhouse movies, kung fu movies or whatever, and people would go there because it was cheap and they loved this stuff.
Mhm.
There's also a certain amount of aspect of fantasy when it comes to kung fu movies.
Right.
But then if you look at most of the old kung fu films from the 70s, many of them had an undercurrent of someone who is traditionally disempowered fighting against the establishment. And if you look at that, you look at Master Killer, the 36 Chambers, the evil Manchu government, which could be the man, and then,
Right.
oppressing the people. And then he goes to learn the skill to fight them. There's something revolutionary about that speaks to a lot of people cross cultures. And so you look at Bruce Lee in Fist of Fury, and then the Japanese occupied China. They were foreign invaders in their land, and he was the one who stood up to them and said, "Not this time." And so, who doesn't, to a certain degree, have something about those kind of stories that we can relate to? Being in a situation that is not optimized for freedom or liberty or whatever, and then fighting against it, right? So many cultures took to this, and then on top of that, Run Shaw. So those are kind of my more cultural reasons. Now I'll talk about maybe a specific one. All right, Run Shaw
Yeah.
made a deal with a New York company called World Northall to be the sole distributor for those films internationally. And World Northall, which was on Broadway, just the old office is just a few blocks away from where City Wing Tsun is. They made an agreement with the channel that would now be like Fox 5 or something like that, right? Like the normal network television, to every Saturday show a double feature of this impressive kung fu catalog. So as I grew up, I didn't have to go to New York City to see a Shaw Brothers film. It was on Saturday at like 1 p.m. I remember turning the TV on. The first non-Bruce Lee kung fu movie I saw was Heroes of the East with Gordon Liu. And I remember watching that and just seeing this real Chinese movie and real Chinese kung fu and going, oh. And on top of that, I could watch another one the following week. And I think we had a little bit more saturation than they did
Right.
in other areas in the States. Yeah.
Heroes of the East, isn't that also known as Challenge of the Ninja?
It is Challenge of the Ninja.
Okay, you're supposed to be impressed.
Shaolin versus
You're supposed
Ninja.
to be impressed that I know that.
I'm not impressed that you know that, and I'll tell you why. Because that was the American title that everyone thought it was, but it wasn't the real title. It's like people calling Way of the Dragon Return of the Dragon, and it
Right.
just grates me. It's like, that is Way of the Dragon.
Okay.
It is not Return of the Dragon. All right.
Okay.
But
I'm
no,
gonna
it
do
is
another one.
impressive. I'll give you that. All right,
I'm
go
gonna do
ahead.
another. I'm gonna do another one. You ready? snake fist, eagle claw, cat's paw.
Oh man, Snake in the Eagle's Shadow. They actually gave it that horrific title. Can it be any more cumbersome, right? Yeah, it's like when people call 36 Chambers of Shaolin Master Killer.
I know.
Like, ugh. All they did was change the titles, put the word death or kill or whatever. It's not nearly as ridiculous as the German titles, but when I lived in Germany and I saw the German titles of Kung Fu movies, then I was like, whoa, that's, No Retreat, No Surrender, the classic where
Van Damme
Bruce
one?
Lee... Yeah, Van Damme is the bad guy, and Kurt McKinney prays to Bruce Lee's corpse, and the spirit of Bruce Lee comes back to train. Do you know what that movie is called in Germany?
No.
It's called Karate Tiger. And you're like, he doesn't even do karate in the whatever Germans.
Well, we were lucky growing up in Barbados. We got the Hong Kong names for most stuff. Now, okay, so I told you we were going to do name association, and since no, this will be fun because this is actually, now my pronunciation is going to be terrible, but you just introduced it, because the first two names I had on the list were Liu Chia-lang and Liu Chia-hu. I know, right? Terrible pronunciation, but you know who I'm talking about.
Yes, I do. All right.
Okay, right? So I say the names badly, and you think what?
Lao Ka Leung, Lao Ka Fai.
Ah, yeah.
So Run Run Shaw made them use their Mandarin names, partially because those films were marketed for the overseas Chinese that spoke Mandarin, but also he did not want them to have name recognition. So if they became famous, Hollywood agencies wouldn't be able to pick them up because they didn't even have the right name. Both Lao Ka Fai and Lao Ka Leung, that's how they're known in Hong Kong. They're not known by those Mandarin names. And the problem is they even spell them very poorly. So if you went to like some Hong Kong Chinese person who's, let's say, over 40 years old, so they should know who those guys are. And you go, my favorite Hong Kong actor is Liu Chia Hui. He just look at you like, huh? What?
Right.
Because even if that particular Hong Kong Chinese person could speak Mandarin, it's not even close in Mandarin, and they would have no idea why are you using Mandarin names for Cantonese actors, and they're so poorly pronounced. So that was actually Run Run Shaw being very shrewd, so that they wouldn't have name recognition, so he could keep them under contract for himself. There's something even more sinister about those spellings than just a mispronunciation.
Right, but now, so for anybody in the audience who doesn't know who those two guys are,
okay,
tell them who they
are. Well, if they don't know them at all, I mean, I suppose Lau Ka Fai is the one that most people would know because he was in both Kill Bill films. He was like the crazy 88 guy in the first one, and then he was famously Pai Mei in the second one. So that's him. And then the other one, Lau Ka Leung, was although he was also an actor and a screen fighter, he was slightly more known as a director and choreographer, and he's the guy who directed like 36 Chambers and stuff, but he was an excellent martial artist in his own right. And Lau Ka Leung was a legitimate Chinese Kung Fu master. He wasn't just a movie guy. He was actually a Hung Gar master who transitioned into films and stuff. So he was very legit.
So I don't have as extensive a knowledge of Kung Fu films as do you. So you wouldn't be able to answer the question, what's your favorite Kung Fu film? But I can, right? But tell me what you think of my choice. My favorite Kung Fu film is Snake and Crane Arts of Shaolin.
An early Jackie Chan film.
Yep. I love it to death.
Yeah, so I mean, I have absolutely no problem with that. But people say what their favorite. I put the other day, I don't know if you saw, I posted a photo of Bruce Lee and Nora Mao from Fist of Fury. And I posted it on my Instagram and Facebook. And I said, oh, what's your favorite Bruce Lee movie? Just kind of to give people a reason to comment and,
Yeah.
you know, help the algorithm. And, you know, a lot of people like Fist of Fury, Way of the Dragon. And one guy was like, well, I know it's not probably like, I'm kind of a simpleton. I like Enter the Dragon. And I'm like, you don't need to apologize because Enter the Dragon is your favorite Bruce Lee movie just because the sophisticated people are either going to say it's Fist of Fury or Way of the Dragon. I'm like,
Yeah.
stick with it. So if you like Shaolin, Snake and Crane Arts of Shaolin with Jet Li, a very, I believe, a Lo Wei directed Taiwanese film, that is totally fine. I mean, who am I to say like, no, that is not, if you say it's your favorite Kung Fu movie, then I take that as a fact that that's what you believe.
I'm
fine with it.
I think it has the greatest choreography, right? Especially, yeah, right. But remember, right? Remember, you and I are not from the same. We're not in the same age group. Okay.
Yes.
Right. But especially that fight scene when he fights the three brothers, when he says, you're not famous, you're notorious, right? When he fights those three guys, I just think it's got some of the best choreography. And then when he fights the Normal character, she plays the flute, and then her bodyguard, he fights him, and there's a sequence where they slow it down and you see him move perfectly into the crane position. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Come on. It's glorious.
No, I mean, most of those films. So one thing you can definitely say about like kind of the pre-modern Hong Kong Kung Fu movies, I should say, is that they took a fantastic amount of care to the choreography, and they were able to do like multiple movements in one shot and make it look convincing and make it look stylistic. And that's something you don't see so much nowadays, where everything is shot really quickly and chopped up and then put together to look like something. Which is why I think some of the John Wick films are such a breath of fresh air, because you actually see him go back and forth for a little bit. It's not just John Bourne cut, right? So I think in general, when you see those old Kung Fu movies like Snake and the Crane Arts of Shaolin, or Snake and the Eagle Shadow, Drunken Master, Magnificent Butcher, any of those kind of era films, you're looking at usually two people who are able to sustain very intricate choreography for more than one or two beats. And I think that era is kind of gone. So it makes sense why any one of those films could easily be someone's favorite, because there was a care to the choreography and an expectation of the actors, which you can no longer have. There's a documentary made by Hong Kong stuntmen that came out, I think last year or the year before. I think it's just called Hong Kong Stuntmen. It's a documentary. And Dwight, if you have a chance to see it, I would highly recommend it, because it's all these old Hong Kong stuntmen now reflecting back on their career, including working with Bruce Lee and stuff. And they talk about what it was like back then, the type of training, the type of things they were expected to do. And then later, not to give too much away, but then it was like, now they have the new class of people who are learning stunt work. And it's like 5 people in there in Hong Kong who even have interest in doing it. And you back then you had legitimate martial artists who figured out how to transition to the screen, or you had operatically trained martial artists like Sammo Hung, Jackie Chan, who then transitioned to stunts and screen. But all of these people had a background and were able to put these skills and make it look great. And nowadays, you don't have anyone in Hong Kong who's done 10 years of opera training by the time they're 18. You don't have that anymore. The economic conditions in Hong Kong do not require parents to sell their kids to opera troops because they can't afford to feed them. The economic requirements that created economic situation in Hong Kong that created Jackie Chan and Sammo Hung doesn't exist anymore. They're prosperous. You know, you don't need to sell your kids off to the op school just so that they have a solid shot in life. So the next generation, they don't have the martial arts background. Look, Bruce Lee was not just a martial artist. He grew up on the sets of films. He knew how to act in front of a camera. He knew lighting and staging and all these kind of things before he even made those movies. So when are you going to find people with this kind of background to make these kind of films anymore? It's unfortunately, you know, the era of the Hong Kong films that we all know and love is long gone, and they're not going to make anything in Hong Kong that's any more exciting than what they can make here. So
all right, let's stay in the realm of film for a second. I say the name Jeff Imada.
Um, and I think his Bali Song manual from the 80s.
Okay. I say,
Yes. I mean, I know he's also done stunt work, but like if
yeah,
it's the Rorschach test, and you
yes.
say, I remember the book where he's holding the Bali Song in the front there, and like that's
Okay.
what pops up. Yeah.
Okay. Chad Stahelski.
Who?
Ah,
Who?
interesting.
Who?
Interesting.
Wait, I gotta
Really?
write this name. I gotta write this name down because I'm gonna have to Google it because otherwise it's gonna bother me. Who? Chad
Chad Stahelski.
Stahelski. So I mean, there's something familiar about that name, but no. If you held a gun to my head right now, I couldn't tell you anything about Mr.
Wow.
Stahelski. No, who is he?
The director of John Wick.
Oh, okay, okay. I actually know
Yeah.
some stunt guys who worked on the third John Wick. So I actually know them personally, but I don't know much about the
Yeah.
director of that film. Okay, all right,
Oh,
good,
okay.
good to know.
All
Good
right.
to
No,
know.
I'll send you some stuff on
Yes.
that.
Okay.
Okay. Now, for some reason, I believe you would recognize this name, Rob Ager. Do you know?
Rob Ager?
Yeah.
No, yeah. I thought you were gonna give me Chinese names. What are all these Westerners here? How am I how am I supposed to know these non-Chinese people?
I'm never giving you Chinese names again. I am so embarrassed. I am so embarrassed at my pronunciation. But
That's
I gotta
okay.
confess. I gotta confess. Your ability to speak Canton, I absolutely love hearing you speak Chinese.
Yeah.
It's one of the most endearing things for me about you.
Oh, thank you, thank you. I appreciate it. I mean, my Chinese is very basic, very, 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 very basic.
Yeah,
But when it comes to the martial art terms and stuff like that, I've tried to go to great pains to say it a little bit more accurately. I don't always do that though. Like if I just say Chi Sao, I just say Chi Sao real quick. I don't necessarily pronounce it in the proper Cantonese way because it's kind of almost off-putting to pronounce it pitch perfect in the middle of an English sentence. So when I teach Wing Chun, I'll just say Wing Chun. I'll say Chi Sao. I'll say Pak Sao. I'm not going to say it in a more Chinese way. But I definitely appreciate you
yeah.
noticing that about me.
Okay.
I've
I
gone
do
through
have
great
one,
pains to yeah.
and it is a Chinese name, right?
Okay.
Fukyung.
Okay. Yes. You want to know what my
Yeah.
impression or what comes to mind?
No, you're so.
Um,
What comes to mind?
an avuncular character in Bruce Lee's life who gets too much credit for influencing Bruce Lee's martial arts by certain pockets of his followers. All right.
Yeah.
We're in a bit of a because the thing is I don't have anything against Fook Young. I don't never even met him or whatever, but the claims made by some of Fook Young's followers and descendants in terms of what he taught Bruce Lee and his impact on Bruce Lee, I find some of them are slight exaggerations and obvious ones at that, to borderline psychopathy in terms of what these people think the relationship of these two men actually were. To think that Fook Young, who was an opera actor who knew Bruce's father and was living in Seattle, knew some type of red boat Wing Chun, as if there is no specific lineage of Wing Chun called red boat Wing Chun. It's just older 1850s strain of the style. But to think that he knew that when at that time, when you read Jesse Glover's books and stuff like that, mentioning it, there was no claim that this was a red boat Wing Chun guy. He became a red boat Wing Chun guy later in the people's recollections, like the longer Bruce Lee's been dead, the better Vic Moore's memory on beating Bruce Lee gets. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like
Yeah.
it's amazing. Like, for me, I'm the opposite. The longer away since something happened, usually my memory gets more fuzzy. But there's certain people, their memory just gets better with age, and they get details that they didn't have 30 years ago, which is very curious. So Vic Moore being one of the biggest offenders of his ever improving memory about how he beat Bruce Lee in front of a room full of people that no one saw it after he couldn't stop Bruce Lee's punch. It's very, very interesting. So I almost so Fook Young, then now it's like, oh, he was a red boat Wing Chun guy who secretly taught Bruce Lee red boat Wing Chun, or he was a Wing Chun guy who secretly completed Bruce Lee on the Wing Chun system. Well, there's lots of problems with this. First of all, Bruce Lee never made a claim that he had ever completed the Wing Chun system, which he might have had he in fact finished it from Fook Young. But they have an explanation for that. Bruce didn't want Yip Man to lose face because Yip Man was his teacher and he kind of taught him and told him not to make a big deal out of it. So you always have these kind of things. Well, the reason he didn't tell anyone is because he was sworn to secrecy to it, right? That's like almost always a de facto explanation for why so-and-so never admitted that they learned from someone else after they died, right?
Yeah.
Then you have that, but then you have, okay, well then he learned all this super secret, awesome Wing Chun, which is better than the Yip Man Wing Chun, because of course, the Fook Young guys are never going to say it was on par with the Yip Man stuff. Of course, Fook Young's Wing Chun was like worlds beyond anything Yip Man ever knew, right? And he taught this to Bruce Lee. Yet somehow, after Bruce Lee had his fight with Wong Jack Man, he still had doubts about Wing Chun. Yet somehow, none of this Red Boat Wing Chun really got taught in Jeet Kune Do later. So it was so great, Bruce Lee never showed it, taught it, claimed it, or it never didn't solve all of his problems. So I go like, you got to be careful on how strong of a claim of how good this stuff was you want to talk about before Bruce Lee went and didn't teach it or didn't think it was that great. It seems like they would have they wouldn't want to claim that if Bruce Lee, and I'm not saying Bruce Lee disavowed Wing Chun, this is a topic for another podcast, but like if the Wing Chun that Bruce Lee learned from Fook Young was so great, then why all the soul searching after the Wong Jack Man fight? Why the occasional criticisms about what Wing Chun had or didn't have in his private notes? Where were the notes going like, Wing Chun has this limitation, but the stuff I learned from Fook Young fixed that? We don't find that in Bruce Lee's notes. Mm-hmm. So I feel that, as always, the burden of proof is on the people making the claim. It's not my point to debunk what Fook Young taught Bruce Lee. I'm still waiting to see substantial evidence that what they claim was in fact taught. Now, I'll tell you what, if they can produce that evidence, I'll be the first to tell you I was wrong. But I just don't see it coming.
Yeah. Okay. One more. Name. And then maybe 2 questions and we're done.
All right. Sounds good.
Okay. Chinese name. Wing Chun person. Ju Wan.
Oh, Ju Wan. Very interesting character in the Wing Chun world. Ju Wan is very interesting, as a matter of fact. And he's someone that I would like to know more about, but I would be more interested in what his senior students in Hong Kong would have to say about him. And this is no slight on his American representatives like Jason Lau or Francis Fong, but I'm much more interested in what his Chinese guys who didn't get integrated into either the U.S. Wing Chun scene or the U.S. Jeet Kune Do scene, just people who know the Wing Chun. I want to know about that because Ju Wan, although he was a student of Yip Man, called Yip Man Sifu, he's technically a contemporary of Yip Man as well, because he was from Fatzan, or at least he had learned Wing Chun in Fatzan from supposedly the same teacher who taught Yip Man, either, I believe, Chung So, Bruce Lee Si Hing. I believe that Ju Wan originally learned from him and then came to Hong Kong and continued his training under Yip Man. So that means that technically, I believe it would be Chung So. I might be wrong on that fact. Someone who learned from Chan Ma Shan, I believe Chung So, was actually the Sifu of Ju Wan, which would make Yip Man Ju Wan's Si Heng. Oh no, sorry, not Si Heng. Would make him Si Bak or Si Zuk or something like that, right? Let me see. If his Sifu was no. So he would be a Si Zuk, his younger Kung Fu uncle. So that means that actually Yip Man is Ju Wan's Si Zuk, not his Sifu. But Ju Wan respected Yip Man so much in Hong Kong that he actually called him Sifu. So that's an interesting dynamic that you didn't really have between Yip Man and his other students. Ju Wan had, from what I understood, some. I'm hoping I'm not telling tales out of school, and I don't believe this is a very controversial statement, but Ju Wan had some triad connections. And as a result, he also taught a number of people who would later become famous Hong Kong actors, because there was a very strong interplay between organized crime and the film industry in Hong Kong. Yeah. And from Master Killer, I don't know, have you seen 36 Chambers, right?
Yeah.
You know the guy who challenges Gordon Liu's character, who believes he shouldn't make that other chamber, and he's like, well, if you can beat me, you can make your other chamber, and then he fights them, and finally he comes up with a 3-sectional staff. Well, so that guy that Gordon Liu fights, an actor named Lei Hoi Sang. Lei Hoi Sang was a Ju Wan student in real life. He's actually was a Wing Chun guy in real life and learned from Ju Wan. Same thing with T. Long, Dick Long, Tommy Long, this famous Shaw Brothers actor, was also a Ju-1 student.
Ah,
So I'm curious for a couple reasons. One, I would love to talk to some senior students of Ju-1 in Hong Kong because I want to find out more about him. I want to find out more about his so-called relationship to the triads, if they'll even talk about that. And I want to know about how he got these movie guys to learn from him. And I want to know, from a martial arts perspective, when he taught his students, how much of what he taught was from So and how much was from Yip Man. I want to know about that. So, no, I find Ju-1 really, really quite fascinating. But I think that some of his U.S. representatives might be doing more Jeet Kune Do than Ju-1 Wing Chun. So I don't know how accurate what they're doing is in terms of, I want to know what that man's art was in Hong Kong. I don't want to know what people did with it 40 years later. So,
okay.
so I actually am quite interested in it.
Okay. All right. Now I'm gonna be Dre.
Oh, geez.
And
One Dre is enough.
I'm gonna be Dre and read you questions that people sent.
Okay.
All right. So Clara Melton wants to know,
Okay.
what are your favorite drills or combination of techniques to practice on the wooden dummy?
I don't have any because I don't drill on the wooden dummy. I practice on the wooden dummy. So I don't go like, oh, I have like these outside of the form. Oh, I got these like 10 really cool drills I like to do on the dummy. I don't approach the dummy that way at all. The dummy for me is not, I don't drill. I mean, yeah. Do I do things 100 times in a row to get it better when I'm practicing? Yes. But I don't have a set of drills I do on the dummy. I do for my students to get, but I don't do that anymore. The dummy for me is not for training, it's for practice. And I differentiate between training and practice. So I only practice on the dummy. So, I mean, practice is something deliberate, and it's a little bit more, it's the face of it can change a little bit. So I believe in intentional practice. There's something I'm having an issue with in terms of sticking with my partner's arm. So I'm going to use the wooden dummy as a mechanism to kind of grind out this mistake here and then go and try it out over there. But is that a drill? Because the next time I go to it, I'm going to do something else. So I don't approach the dummy in a drill based kind of way anymore. I do the form. I practice stuff with high levels of repetition, but the dummy is sometimes just a problem solving mechanism for me. And that the face of how I would train on it would change from day to day because I really practice with the dummy. I don't really drill or train drills on it, so to speak. And maybe that's a distinction without a difference. Maybe it's just a semantics thing, right? But no, I don't. Very disappointingly, I don't have the 10 KFG sets on the drill sets on the dummy that you can learn for the low price of your critical faculties. All right.
Okay. Okay. Greg Rhodes says, with Alex's interest in Wing Chun, which I thought was that was an interesting way to word it. With Alex's interest in Wing Chun.
It's literally
right?
my whole life.
Yeah, right. Does he have any clan insights? Now, I don't know if that's a mistype or whatever, but it says clan insights into Bruce Lee and Duncan Lung's 1950s visit to a Choi Li Foot master. Any idea of the name of the instructor and any connection with the Lacey twins lineage? Does any of that make sense? Because I have no idea what it's about.
Okay. Yeah. So all of it makes sense. How do I put this gingerly? Bruce Lee's kind of a famous guy. There were a lot of people who had direct, secondary, and tertiary links to Bruce Lee throughout his lifetime. Sometimes the people with secondary or tertiary links, so non-direct links to Bruce Lee, seem to have expanded on those stories post Bruce Lee's death.
Okay.
To the point where it's unverifiable. And I'm of the opinion, a claim, in order for it to be, for us to have a discussion about it, we have to verify, yes, this is true, or no, it's false. When a claim is unverifiable, then I consider the claim weak on its head. And it's very easy to create unverifiable claims of, when I was a teenager, Bruce and I went here knocking on the door and then beat up a bunch of these guys. Bruce Lee secretly learned from Jin Fu Mark. He learned Southern Mantis in New York. You know, all of these, Vic Moore thrashed Bruce Lee at the the Long Beach tournament, yet no one saw it. And Bruce, and coincidentally, he couldn't stop one of Bruce Lee's punches. But he actually beat Bruce Lee up afterwards. I'm going to tell you the real story. I don't know the Lacey brothers personally. I know that they're a Choi Lei-Fut family, and they have made some claims about relationship with Bruce Lee and known Bruce Lee in Hong Kong and stuff like that. I haven't. I'll just put it this way: nothing has come across my desk where I go, "Oh, yeah, okay, that makes sense." And as far as Duncan Leung goes, he's also a bit of a controversial character in the Wing Chun family, which doesn't make him good, bad, or indifferent. There are also certain claims about, how close his relationship was to Bruce Lee, where I go, Bruce Lee was a prolific letter writer and a prolific note taker. And I just find it weird when there's not even a scant reference to any of these people in anything that comes up with Bruce Lee himself, except for what comes out of their mouth 50 years later. And it doesn't mean that they didn't know Bruce Lee. All right. It doesn't mean that these things didn't happen. But I'm also under no obligation to believe anything that comes to me without evidence. And that doesn't mean that those claims are not true. I'm just, until I see evidence, I'm not going to say, yeah, Bruce Lee walked into a Choi Lei-Fut with this school with this guy, blah, 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 and they did this. No chance. Yeah. No chance. It's not my burden of proof to substantiate. Just like in legal system, the person making the claim has the burden of proof. It's not my burden to refute it. It's their burden to prove it. And until they furnish that evidence, I'll just go, as we say in America, cool story, bro.
Yeah. You just made me think of somebody. Do you know who Ben Shapiro is?
Yes.
You know when he says very often, my wife is a doctor?
Uh-huh.
Right? You just made me think, when you said in the legal system, you made me think, I can just picture you going, because I have heard you say, my wife is a lawyer.
Yes, right? yes. Yeah, I mean, but there's a reason, okay, I secretly learned a style of Wing Chun from Yip Man at midnight when no one was around.
Yeah.
And I'm the only one who knows this style. And he taught it to me and made me swear an oath. That is an unfalsifiable claim. And even though in some weird universe it could be true, no one is under any obligation to believe something like that. And it's not to say that you're a hater if you don't believe it. It's totally fine to say, and this is the intellectually honest thing that most Wing Chun people don't want to ever say, I don't know. I don't actually know. And I don't know if that is in fact knowable. Yeah.
Okay, is this knowable? The fourth form of Wing Chun. Is it the wooden fist form? Is that the one?
No, I mean, normally the canonical order for Wing Chun form, Siudam, Pao Tam, Kyu, Biuji, the wooden dummy, Mok Yan Zhong, then the pole, and then the knives. And where Chi Sao and things get taught in between is usually up to the individual instructor. So if you say fourth form, canonically, I think you're talking about the wooden dummy. Or are you talking about some made-up form that someone claims that they have that no one else has, right?
Right.
Yes. There is also a form in Jeet Kune Do, isn't there not? Some supposed form. What is it called again? I forgot the name. It has a Chinese name or something.
Yeah. Oh, shoot. I should remember this because I railed against it on at least 2 episodes. What the hell?
But there's supposedly some Chinese form in Jeet Kune Do that was something maybe Bruce Lee was putting together or something like that, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, look, it's
maybe
really
somebody
easy
will type. I'll look and see if somebody types it in. Why can't I remember what the hell? I did a whole episode on it. Yeah, because
I forgot it too, right? I forgot it too.
It really annoyed me because it's one of the dumbest things to try to inject into Jeet Kune Do, because
100%.
and this is something, in all honesty, this is something that I gain from watching your approach to things. I say to people, if we're gonna form opinions, beliefs, theories, or whatever about Bruce Lee, let's do it based on what he did say, what he did right, as opposed to your projection of your preferences, your likes and dislikes onto Bruce Lee, especially when they do the hypothetical, about Bruce Lee in the UFC. I mean,
yeah, bro, I didn't hear that Bruce Lee fought anyone in MMA in the 60s. Oh, you mean like Chuck Norris did? And all these guys they're all saints now because they had this devastating fighting record in point karate in the 60s, and now we need to take their word on everything, right? Yeah, no, it's all perspectives, and it's very easy for people to kind of mix all the sausage together.
Okay. All right. I swear to you, this is the last question, because since we said UFC, Dr. Kenneth J.
Yes.
What from him, if anything, have you taken and put into class structure at City Wing Tsun?
Ooh, this is almost another podcast. I have to say, outside of Dr. Mark Chang, Dr. Kenneth J is probably one of the biggest influences in the way I approach both the way I teach things and how I train myself. Everything from movement to strength to performance to how your brain affects how you interpret movements and learn things compared to how it's classically taught. Kenneth J, I think, he's one of my good friends, but I always feel when I'm in his presence, he's so he asks me a lot of stuff, and I tell him a lot of things about Bruce Lee and stuff, but I always feel that it's an uneven exchange, because what I get from him that I'm able to kind of use to improve how I teach things, how I train, how I do cardio, how I do strength training, how I approach movement, how I approach teaching movement, has been completely improved by Dr. Kenneth J's teaching. Also, because he is a scientist with sports physiology, he has really shown me how important it is to adopt a more scientific methodology to how you problem solve things, as opposed to just going on things that feel good or feel right, or things that you've liked traditionally, but maybe this isn't the best way to actually do this. So he has given me the push to move things in a more scientific direction in terms of my own training and how I teach it. And I cannot thank him enough. And I always feel that I hope that he knows how much he has helped me improve how I do things. And I just find him one of the most fascinating people to talk to.
Okay. I just remembered the name of the form. And just as Norman Taylor typed it in, Moon.
That's right. Which I think is supposed to be NG, like five gates or 5 doors. So actually
5 gates. Yeah.
Moon is actually how you would pronounce it. So yes, that's right. I remember because Big Sean was the person who told me about that. And I was like, it was after one of our Dudes of Kung Fu episodes. And I was like, there's a form in Jeet Kune Do. And then he sent me like sketches and stuff like this. And then, but I unfortunately never had a chance to get to really find out what the story behind that was. So.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you the story. I'll tell the very first time I saw it, I looked at it and I go, "Whoa, that's what I saw them doing at the Inasano Academy in Yuri Nakamura's class." Do you know who Yuri Nakamura is?
He's a Japanese JKD certified instructor, correct? Yes.
Right. And the top student of Satoru Sayama in Shudo, in shoot wrestling.
Okay.
Right. So I looked at it and I go, oh, this has to come from him, because it is the perfect Japanization of certain techniques. I mean,
interesting.
When it's done, it's beautiful. And I've argued it, debated it, whatever you want to say, with a number of people. And people say, the whole thing, if it works, right? if it's useful, then you should do
Yes.
it.
Right.
My contention, however, is, but it's ridiculous, right? Inosanto himself has said that Bruce Lee was violently opposed to the idea of forms. And then they go, oh, but Bruce Lee was talented in forms. Yeah, okay, so he was, right? And after being talented in forms, he went in a different direction. So what are you telling me? You're telling me that in following his directions or his directives, you're bringing it back in?
Right.
You know?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. So we have our own debate about it. And it's similar to, I'm sure you've heard about them, the Jeet Kune Do wooden dummy sets.
Yes, I've seen them.
Right? Yeah.
Yep.
Sure.
That's a topic for another day.
Yeah, right. Okay. And we won't have time, but I hope you'll come back, right? And we'll talk again.
Anytime. Let me know. Anytime.
Right. And tell people where's the best place to find you, because you're all over.
Best place. I mean, if you want to follow me or have some kind of contact with me, Instagram is usually the best place, at the Kung Fu Genius. Remember, it's at the Kung Fu Genius. And or if you're interested in my classes or doing online private training with me or whatever, it's citywt.com. So CITYWT.com. I do online private training for people who are not, in New York, and all my books, Wooden Dummy books, Cheese Out books, all that stuff is on there. So citywt.com or Instagram at the Kung Fu Genius are the best ways to get a hold of me.
All right. Alex Richter, it's always a pleasure to hook up with you, man.
Thank you, sir.
Next time you're in Miami, give me a call. We'll do brunch again.
Absolutely. I look forward to it, man. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me again. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. All right, folks, that was episode number 257 of the Jeet Kune Do Dialogues. So, you know the deal. Like, comment, all that good stuff. Ask questions if you want. I'll ask Alex to go through the comments and see if there's anything that he needs to reply to. Follow me on Twitter at Dwight Woods, on Instagram at Dwight D. Woods, at paypal.me/UnifiedMA Miami. The Jeet Kune Do Journey Volume 1 still available, paypal.me/UnifiedMA Miami. Okay, you can show support for the show by visiting JKDRebel.com, click on the Rebel Gear link, and that's where you'll find stuff like this. The JKD Notables coffee mug, also available in garments as t-shirt, long sleeve, short sleeve, sweatshirt, hoodie, and all that good stuff. And I don't have a graphic here for it, but consider becoming a sponsor of the Jeet Kune Do Dialogues YouTube channel. Just go to the channel, click on the join button, and that's where you'll see all the details about becoming a sponsor. I have big hopes and dreams for this channel and what it is that we bring to the martial art audience. And it really, really helps to have supporters and sponsors. So that's it for today. Until the next episode, this is Dwight Woods of Gcondope Rebel signing off. You guys have a great weekend. Talk soon. Take care.